Hi everyone, my name is Megan Hart. I'm a senior product manager at eBay, and today I'd like to talk to you about paving your path to product management. One of the things I love so much about product management is that people come from such a diverse set of backgrounds. Some people were in engineering, maybe studied computer science, others might have been in marketing or a particular specialist in an industry and then found their way into product management. So while this is definitely a benefit and it's so great to meet people from different backgrounds and diverse skills, it can also be a challenge because there's no specific major or ABC steps or path that everyone takes to get into product management. I know that this was something that I struggled with my transition into PM. So what I'd love to do today is share with you what my experience has been like, how I navigated my product management journey, and a couple of top tips or pieces of advice that I'm hoping that I can help you apply to your own path to PM to expedite you getting to that dream job. So to start, I'd love to just give you a background of what my journey has been like and my path to PM. So I studied communications and business at Northeastern University. And when I graduated, I wanted to become an advertising executive. So I joined Havas Media, which is an advertising agency, as a media planner, was there for a couple of years, and then realized that this long-term goal of becoming an advertising executive actually wasn't quite for me. So I decided I wanted to use my marketing, advertising, communication skills and apply them to a nonprofit. So I transitioned to Boston Children's Hospital, working in their nonprofit in their fundraising department. Again, I was there for a little bit of time and started thinking about my career long term and felt like that wasn't quite the place that I wanted to be. But at this point, I had to figure out then what was, where did I want to go? So I used this time at Boston Children's to kind of do some self-evaluation. I thought about what I liked, what I didn't like, my strengths, my weaknesses, and actually sat down and wrote all of these things down. And once I had a good picture of what I wanted to focus on in my career, I actually just went to Google, meaning just started searching on the internet to see what type of roles were out there that might make sense for me. And this is how I actually discovered product management. So I came across an article from a PM who was describing what he did for work. He said he solves customer problems, he works between engineering and business, he wears many hats, and I thought that sounded great. I thought that played to my skills and was the direction that I thought I wanted to go down. But I had never been a product manager before. I never really worked directly with an engineering or technical team. So how was I going to know that this was what I wanted to pursue? So what I did was actually had the opportunity to test it out. I picked up a project while I was at Boston Children's to act as kind of a mini PM. So we had this photo management software that had a bunch of different photos and assets that we use for our marketing communication. And nobody on my team would actually use it to find their assets except for me. So everyone would just email me and ask for whatever it is that they needed. Obviously, this wasn't ideal, and it took longer and meant that people weren't utilizing what they had available to them. So I did some user research. I figured out where the friction was, why people weren't logging in and using it themselves. I worked with our IT team to make updates based on the requirements that I came up with. And then I did kind of a relaunch, re-rollout of the software to my entire department. And through that entire experience, I realized that I loved it. I loved that I was solving customer problems. I loved that I was helping people make their jobs easier. So I was able to test out and validate that that was indeed the direction I wanted to pursue. So my next challenge was, how was I going to get a product manager role when I had never worked as a PM before? So what I decided to do was focus on where I might be able to have a stepping stone. What sort of role or organization might I be able to join to help me learn and grow to develop the skills that I needed to eventually get into product management? So I decided I was going to focus on advertising technology. Advertising, of course, because I had that background and I had that specialty and I already knew that market. And by working in advertising technology, I was hoping I could get more familiar with these technology tools and softwares and ideally be able to work directly with engineering and start gaining PM skills. So I found an opportunity at OwnerIQ, which at the time was an edtech startup in Boston, and they had a customer support role. And I thought about this, and it wasn't a PM role, but I would get the opportunity to work directly with engineering to still solve customer problems, to become more familiar with the software. And it was a small company, so I would also have the opportunity to grow. And I joined OwnerIQ, and it was exactly what I needed. I was able to grow into a product manager role. There actually weren't really any other product managers there before, so just my director and myself, who she also didn't really have product background, we were able to learn about product management. I listened to podcasts, went to events like this one to learn about product management best practices and then apply them in my role and to grow the PM practice at OwnerIQ. So it was a fantastic experience and stepping stone for me to learn the skills that I needed to transition into product management. So after some time there, I was ready to start applying to getting hired in my first product manager role. And what I decided was that I was going to continue to focus on the advertising space. I felt that because I had that background and I had that specialty and I already understood advertising, that I would really have a leg up as an expert in that area, which could get me noticed, even though I didn't really have tons of product management experience. So I joined IPG Mediabrands, which is an advertising agency, so it came full circle, as a senior product manager. And while I was there, I actually focused specifically on a data product role. So now that I had some of this initial product management background and specialty in advertising, I was now able to continue to kind of build out that specialty by focusing on as more of a data-heavy PM. So I had a great experience there, and then decided my next challenge or approach to continuing my PM career was that I wanted to work for a large technology company. So rather than working for an advertising company, I wanted to take a little bit of a different spin. And so I did join eBay, which of course is an e-commerce company, but I do work within their advertising department, still focusing on advertising products and continuing to build on as more of a data PM. So I wanted to go through this not just to talk about myself, but I wanted you guys to see what my path to PM looked like and some of the decisions that I made as I kind of continued to develop and grow my career. So now I'll jump into a couple of top tips or pieces of advice that I learned from this journey that I'm hoping that you guys can apply to your own. My first tip is to discover your options. So this is really what I did when I was at Boston Children's Hospital. Of course, the fact that you guys are listening to this means that you already kind of decided that product management may be a path for you, that a product is something you want to pursue. But I wouldn't discount this step because I think especially with product management, it's such a huge industry. Each company looks for something a little bit different. There's so many types of product managers. So I still think that this step is really important to evaluate your strengths and your weaknesses and help you figure out what you want to focus on. So you can really focus your next steps and clarifying that path ahead. So what I suggest is doing some self-evaluation. What do you like? What do you not like? Where are your strengths and where are your weaknesses? Maybe even writing them down like I did. Then turn to Google, start searching. That might help you figure out what companies are out there, what industries are out there, and what might help you play to your strengths. Talk to family, friends, acquaintances. Just kind of get the word out there because you never know who will help you discover what sort of opportunities there could be that could be worth pursuing. And if you get the opportunity, test it out. Similar to what I did at Boston Children's with that project, if you can find something to do in your everyday job or outside of work that you might be able to act as a mini PM and really test out and see if it's something that you like. And one thing I just want to caution is don't get too caught up. It could be, I know I found it difficult where I wanted to just, define my 10, 20, 30 years down the road, what my dream job was going to be. But then I kind of had to step back and realize that my path will change and I will learn as I go So this is really just to help figure out where you want to focus on next. My next tip is to build your network. So once I realized that I wanted to focus on product management, I realized that my network really consisted of folks that I knew from the advertising space, but not necessarily people in product. So I didn't really have a group of people that I could learn from. So I wanted to build out that network. One of the things that I did was reach out to my connections on LinkedIn for introductions to people that they knew. And I did this specifically by researching companies that I was interested in, roles, people in roles that I was interested in, and then asking for these introductions so that I could learn more about their experience, what it was like to be a PM at those companies. And by connecting via LinkedIn, someone you already know, that was a really good way to get that introduction and get somebody's attention who you may not meet just on the street every day. Another suggestion to build your network is to tap into your alumni group. So I know for me, Northeastern University has a bunch of different chapters internationally. I believe some schools also have access to networking virtually, could be especially during these times. So talking to somebody and giving yourself that introduction because you went to the same university is often a really good entry point, again, to make that connection, to actually connect and then be able to leverage that person in your network later on. Attending industry events like this one, I know during these times having everything virtual might be a bit of a challenge, but that doesn't mean that you can't connect with people, like-minded individuals who are attending the same sort of events with you virtually. And hopefully at some point in the future being able to do this in person as well. And then in addition, not only attending events, but volunteering at events. I volunteered in the past for product management conferences, and I felt like that was a really great tool to be able to spend an extended amount of time with, again, like-minded people who are passionate about product management and building that initial relationship that you then can leverage later on. The biggest challenge I faced with this step was that I found it pretty uncomfortable at first. Attending events and putting yourself out there can make you feel a little uneasy, but I promise once you start doing it and you start seeing the results and the responses from people as you introduce yourself, you'll get over the uncomfortableness and you'll realize how effective and important that actually is. So push through and to build out your network, and it's definitely worth it. My next tip is to use your network. And I wanted to separate this out because I think it's one thing to make connections and see your LinkedIn connection numbers going up and up, but it's another thing to actually leverage that network and learn from those people. And that's really where the value comes. So once you make those connections, reach out, ask for one-on-one coffee dates or phone chats, and ask people about their paths to PM. Not only ask about what their experience has been like, but you can also seek out advice. You can ask them about specific challenges you're facing or directions that you want to go, and see if maybe these other more experienced product managers with different background than yourself might have some advice to help you get to where you want to go. And then if it's appropriate, of course, you should leverage your network for references. One thing I will say is that I really think the value of your network is from the learning that you get from people and kind of the long-term relationships that you build out. But that doesn't mean it's not helpful to have connections at different companies or people who might know people, or people who, once they get to know you, might think about you as they see opportunities come up. So, of course, networking is also helpful for that aspect as well. And I just wanted to note, you really will be surprised at how willing people are to lend a hand. I reached out to a number of people that maybe I didn't really know that well and just asked them to tell me about their experience. And people were so receptive and so willing to help out and not really seeking anything in return. So I just encourage you to try this out for yourself. Tip number 4 is to identify your specialty. This is what I did by focusing on advertising as I transitioned into product management. One of the requirements of a product manager is to understand your industry and understand your market and really be an expert. So I think that by focusing on your specialty, it really will give you a leg up in this super competitive space of product management, even if you don't have a huge background of actually being a PM. So I suggest asking yourself, what's your unique strength? What experience can you bring to the table that makes you stand out? And is there an industry you're well versed in and passionate about? And this might help you identify an area that you can focus on to really expedite that journey into product management. And a little bit to the opposite of that, my tip number 5 is to invest in your weak spots. So I suggest, here's a couple of areas that I worked on myself, and by doing these things, it was firstly to actually gain skills in areas where I was a little bit weak, but secondly, by identifying these things and putting some effort towards them early on, it'll give you the opportunity in interviews when you're actually applying for and working to get positions to point out how you are actually working towards improving your weaknesses. So for example, I don't have a computer science background, but I took a few steps, as I'll go through here, to help myself get more familiar with the technology and software development space. So I had something to speak to when I was asked about that in interviews. So a couple resources that helped me. In the technology side, Code Academy, which is an online, you can take courses to learn different programming languages. MIT OpenCourseWare. MIT puts some of their lectures and assignments available for free online. So I was able to take an introduction to computer science class and get more familiar with the concepts there. Public speaking. Toastmasters International is an international organization with chapters all over that you can join and practice your public speaking. So this was helpful for interviewing, for networking, and of course for all the presentations that we do as product managers. Writing. On LinkedIn, you can publish your own blog posts. So I published something about my experience networking. It's a really great way to think about and practice framing your thoughts about a professional topic. And you could even use your network to seek out advice to review what it is that you're writing before publishing it and putting it out there. And then overall, Coursera, Udacity, LinkedIn Learning have courses on product management, collaboration, communication, engineering, all kinds of things you can find there to brush up on your skills. How-to books. I got a book on introduction to web development that was actually a workbook that took me through setting up a website, calling an API, all these different skills that I was able to try out on my own and then say that I accomplished. And then on the PM side, going to events like this one, product management podcasts, anything that you can, books even, to learn about that product management best practices, and then you can apply that to your own way that you think about product management. And so these are all resources that I used kind of in my own free time, and there are many, many more. But you could also think about how you might be able to work on these things in your existing job, in your existing role, maybe by taking on a different project or working with a different team. So lots of different options there. Tip number 6 is to be open to stepping stones. So this was my experience when I worked at OwnerIQ. I could see the role itself had started out, it wasn't a product management role. Maybe that wasn't going to be my dream job in 15, 20 years down the line, but I evaluated that I was going to get a lot out of it, and it made sense to help me get the experience I needed to progress further in my product management journey. So I suggest you ask yourself when you're evaluating these roles, what skills will you be able to work on? Will there be an opportunity for mentorship? And is there room for growth within the organization? And this can really help you figure out whether that next step is going to be valuable to help you continue to grow and push you on your path to PM. Tip number 7, and this is the last one I have, but a very important one, which is hone your story. So after you've taken all of these steps to gain the experience that you need to become a product manager, the next biggest challenge is being able to communicate that. Communicate what you've done and why you're qualified for this product management role. So I suggest you ask yourself, why did you decide to pursue PM? What did you do to get yourself there? What are your strengths and how did you address your weaknesses? And really think about this and use it to frame your story or your elevator pitch, how you're going to introduce your path to PM and why you're qualified to be where you're at. For me, it was actually helpful to write all of this down, and I could figure out what examples I wanted to bring in where and how I wanted to position things. I actually practiced this story at networking events or one-on-ones. When you introduce yourself and somebody asks, "So nice to meet you, what do you do?" This is your opportunity to tell that story. And once I was also comfortable with it, I used my story to structure my resume. That way, hiring managers or recruiters, when they pick up your resume, they can see what that path looked like. If you just post your job titles and your responsibility, and it might seem kind of like mine, like it was a little bit all over the place, it might be harder for them to pick up on how you gain the skills that you needed to be a PM. But if you form it in a way where you're pulling out those experiences that are really relevant to how you are focusing on the strengths and improving your weaknesses on to become a product manager, and you highlight those in your resume, it will make a lot more sense to the hiring managers or the recruiters who are looking at it as to how and why you're transitioning into that PM role. And overall, interviewing is about telling your story. So by practicing this ahead of time and becoming really familiar and comfortable with it ahead of time, you'll be more confident when you go into that interview to be able to articulate all the work that you've done to transition into PM. So to recap, my top tips are: discover your options, build your network, use your network, identify your specialty, invest in your weak spots, be open to stepping stones, and hone your story. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you can apply these couple of tips to transition into product management and find your dream job. Thank you so much.